So this is about someone, I'll read it out. This is about someone who has 13 years of experience, and he says, knows that what my boss is asking is very unreasonable. So how to deal with this situation consciously. Okay. So as I read this question, there are three transformations in conscious business that I feel we need to look at. The first one is, you mentioned it's a case where you have 13 years of experience. So what this tells is that there is a knower mentality. Like 13 years of experience translates for me, as I hear this, is that I know this business, or I know this, how this project or whatever it is, how it works. So this is basically coming from a position of a knower. And this needs to be transformed into a learner mentality. So the mindset changes from being a knower to a learner. So this is number one observation. Number two observation is that your boss is asking you. Now, when you say boss is asking, this is something we call as focusing on vectors that are not in our control, right? I can't stop my boss from asking me something, right? Boss will continue to ask. So if I focus on that, like boss is asking me, then I'm focusing on a vector that is not in my control. Conversely, it is also true that I'm accepting whatever the ask is. So we need to look at the second transformation, which is focusing on vectors that are in our control instead of focusing on vector that is not in our control. So transformation from being a victim to a player, right? When we focus on vectors that are in our control, we can play with it, right? We can change, we can take some action. And the third thing, what I can notice here is, you mentioned that the ask is unreasonable, right? Now the ask is unreasonable for whom? For you. So for example, I'm in your position, then it's unreasonable for me, whereas it's not unreasonable for my boss, right? So your boss, I don't know whether it's he or she, so I'll just say boss. Now your boss is asking something which is unreasonable for you, not for boss. Okay, so this is the third transformation, which is being responsible. So taking the responsibility, not responsibility in the sense that you are responsible for something, but a responsibility. And this happens when you say, rephrase it, that it is unreasonable for me, or it is difficult for me. It's like, suppose I go to a gym, and on very first day, I want to lift maybe 30, 40, 50 kilo weight. Its weight is heavy, but weight is heavy for me. But someone who is already going to gym for many days and has a very good built-up body, for that person, maybe 30, 40 kg is not a heavy weight. So the weight as such is not heavy. It's heavy for me. It's the same thing in the business. Whatever the task you say is difficult for you, you have to add that so that you know, like, this is difficult for me. The task as such is being done by many other people in many companies. The same task. For them, it's not difficult, right? So three transformations I can notice in this question. First is change from a knower mentality, knower mindset to a learner mindset. Second is focusing on vectors that are not in our control to focusing on vectors that are in our control. And third is taking a responsibility in the sense that this task is difficult for me. Because when we do these three transformations or these changes, and in conscious business, there are ways you can actually work out different solutions for each one of these transformation. What we can do in this simple case, I will explain. 13 years is not a very long time in terms of technology and all. It all changes maybe every 6 months, maximum 1 year, right? So there could have been changes in the customer requirements, products, technology, ways of deployment, how projects are managed. So many different things can change. So there is a scope of learning, right? Second is that since I cannot stop my boss from asking me whatever the task or whatever the asking, let us not focus on the boss to change or wait for the boss to change. That means the boss to stop asking anything. That's not going to happen, right? So now you might have a situation where you already, what they call, the plate is already full, right? So if it is an additional task, maybe there is a possibility that you can discuss it out with your boss, saying that, look, I'm already having these many things to do, and since you are asking one more task, maybe I will not be able to do justice to all the other things, and maybe the quality might deteriorate, and I wouldn't like to do a substandard work. So what to do? And then maybe boss reallocate that task to somebody else, or something else might work out. Okay, but then it's not that boss is giving the work, it's also that I'm accepting it, right? And then the most important third thing is very difficult. But when I say it's difficult for me, then options open up. Like, what can I do to become more efficient or more capable of doing that task? Maybe I can learn some new skills, or I can learn something else from somebody, or I can look around and see what others are doing. If it's like a procurement thing, maybe I can ask for schedule of purchases and then line up my suppliers and things like that. So there are so many things. If it's in sales, I can ask for help in lead generation. So many things I can do maybe, and whatever applies in your case. Options will open up, but for that we need to first take the responsibility for it, that this is difficult for me. Once we take that responsibility, then options will open up. So these are the things. But if you look at these transformations, when you become conscious of these three things, there is no anger, there is no frustration, there is no resentment coming in, right? We can understand that, say, okay, I might have one difficult task, but maybe my boss has 10 difficult tasks. So how do I know what is the need? And if it is really something related to the system and processes or something like that, you can say to boss, you can structure a conversation with boss, and we can practice it, where I can play your role and you can play the role of your boss, and then you can feel how it feels to hear some such thing from your subordinate, right? And this kind of role plays are sometimes required, because then you experience the emotions that the boss is going to go through when you discuss the same thing with them, and be prepared for the reaction and response. And then we can also see in our trial conversation what kind of emotions, what kind of reactions can arise, and then we try to minimize those or remove those from our conversations. And to do that, one thing we can do is, first you tell the boss, like, okay, you understand why this task or why this is important, why he's asking this, and say that, like, you really want to do it, but these are the roadblocks I see, and then what we can do to remove them in our systems or in our processes. And I'm sure that no boss would be very unreasonable not to discuss that. And so these are few things you can do about this situation. And yeah, there is one possibility that in spite of taking responsibility, in spite of focusing on vectors in your control, in spite of being a learner, if the ask is really something like 500%, 200%, or 100% growth in the revenue for sales, or project completion in half of the time, or something like that, which is really not possible, then, like we discussed in earlier question, you can take action. But still, without getting upset, angry, or anything like that, just work out on your options. And then, yeah, that's the way to go ahead in an extreme situation. But I don't think this is going that way. You can discuss and resolve these kind of things. So 3 things again: change from a position of being a knower to a learner. There's always something to learn. I'm learning after 30 years of experience in a particular field. Focus on vectors that are in your control, and then take responsibility, because that opens up the options for actions. Yeah. Thank you.